Hi, my name is Lena and welcome to my channel. And I just recorded two videos for you. First one was my year 2017 in books. It was 3 minutes long and have a pretty good audio. And the second was about 25 minutes long and it had no audio at all. So we are trying it again. This is my December 2017 wrap up. This month was a very good month for me because I had 4 body reads and I was afraid to let all these people down, and I was committed to my reading, and I have managed to read 5.5 books. Let's start with the Dragonquest, the second book in Dragonriders of Pern series by Anne McCaffrey. It was body read with Mark Richardson from the channel Richardson Reads. And I have 4 separate videos about it. Discussion, no spoilers kind of videos. But in the nutshell, I love these books because the world building is excellent, the characters are great, the stories are interesting and high paced and entertaining and gripping. And what's a very important detail that they are very well written. It's a very important detail, it turns out. So I recommend those books to you if you like sci-fi and if you like fantasy and if you haven't read any books from about Dragonriders of Pern. So the second book was The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton, which I read with Nastya from the channel AnnaBB03AAV. I will leave all the links into info box down below. And this book is set in 1866 in New Zealand, where people went to make their fortune in gold fields and gold mines. I believe that it's better to read this book knowing nothing about it. It was quite a reading experience, but it's a very simple story told in a very complex and beautiful way. It's like you're getting a present, a big, beautifully wrapped up box. You open it up, and inside another box with clues and with tips and beautifully wrapped up, and you unwrap this one and inside is another box. But when you get down to it, it's a lunchbox. It's nothing much. The story itself is very simple, and I wanted, with such a grand storytelling, I wanted something grand underneath. So you need to accept some small grain of supernatural, the idea that soulmates, that real lovers, they have one soul, one head, one brain, one body, whatever. It reminded me at the same time the Murder on the Orient Express and about the Professor Moriarty. I really wanted to see a supervillain in this tale, and I just it wasn't there. He wasn't there. There were quite a lot of coincidences which I didn't like. It was a grand design. It was a very interesting reading experience, but at the end I feel cheated. After this grand reading experience, I want some grand story left to me, and it's more or less like lifelike and small. So it's up to you whether you want to read it or not. It was quite a reading experience. I enjoyed it very much. It was constantly shifting. When I thought I get the idea, it changed into something else. When I thought again that I get the idea, it changed again. So it was quite an experience, but it has nothing grand inside. So it's up to you. I did enjoy the reading it, and it is quite a chunker, and I read it as an ebook, and I don't believe that I have read such a big book in such a short time. It was gripping, and it was intriguing, it was interesting. So it's up to you. And the third book is The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry, and it was a buddy read with Kathleen Ann, and we're still discussing this book. So I managed to miss all the hype, so I wasn't expecting much of it. I was expecting a neo-Victorian novel. Peg talked quite a bit about neo-Victorian novels. I will try to leave her video into info box too. So I didn't expect much. The writing is beautiful. I like the writing. When you start reading it, it draws you in, but it lets you go quite easily. So I think it is a neo-Victorian novel plus a very strong vibe of feminism. So we have Cora Seaborn, who is a widow now, and we have reason to believe that she was submitted to domestic violence, that her husband dominated her not only physically but psychologically as well. She was under quite a bit of psychological pressure. So she is recovering right now, and she is enjoying her freedom, and she is kind of into biology and into fossils, and she hopes to find a survived dinosaur in Essex, because there are a lot of sightings, a lot of rumors that there is some sort of creature in Essex. And her son, Francis Seaborn, who was by large the most interesting character in the book, he is a very special child, and he is estranged from his mother, but she doesn't dwell much on it. She doesn't dwell much on her feelings. She's very reserved, and her feelings is hidden. I suppose it's a neo-Victorian thing. So she is not about to remarry. She doesn't want to marry again. She wants to enjoy her freedom. And we have Martha, her companion, who is a socialist. And she is an active and a great advocate for the working people, for poor working people. And she wants to provide them with better living conditions. So she is very active in this area. So she's a very active socialist worker, something like that. And we have John Ransom, a girl who, when she grows up, wants to be a scientist or a doctor or a member of parliament. So we have a very strong feministic vibe. In Victorian era, and I'm not sure that it's a very good idea, to rewrite your history. But nevertheless, it was a very interesting reading experience, and it's very well written, but it lacked for me some conflict or some drama. But maybe that's the way it's supposed to be with Victorian novels, with neo-Victorian novels. Uh, so it's up to you to read this novel or not to read this novel. It was a very interesting reading experience. Francis Seaborn is an extremely interesting character, a fascinating character. Sometimes I felt my hair stand up. Some parts of his behavior were quite horrifying, abnormal. But the whole book was like an album of watercolors. It was kind of about Victorian era and not about people. I don't know. About Victorian era and feminism. The first book was the Defense by Vladimir Nabokov, and it was a body read with Marsha Osborne, and we are still discussing this book the way we are still discussing the Essex Serpent with Kathleen Ann. And the language was beautiful. I really enjoyed the writing style. It's the story about a child, a chess prodigy, and the way he was used and thrown away, and the way he tried and couldn't lead a life as an ordinary person. It reminded me about Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, the story about unstable young men. And I don't really think that I really got it, really got the idea of the book. The way I don't really think that I got Mrs. Dalloway, I think will have to reread The Defense. Maybe the thorough discussion with Marsha will help me to understand it. I'm not sure. So I'm really glad that I read it. It had quite a bit of conflict and drama for me. But I don't think that I get the main idea. It probably went over my head. So sorry. And the fifth book was a vintage sci-fi. It was Professor Dowell's Head by Alexander Belyaev. It was a read for me. I read it first in high school, and I do not remember much about it. I didn't remember much about it. So Professor Kern and Professor Doyle worked together on reviving dead and severed animal heads. And when Professor Doyle dies, he becomes the first live human head. And he keeps working, he keeps doing his research because he kind of has nothing left. All he has left is his brains and his work, the work of his lifetime. So he keeps on working, and Professor Kern steals his research and publishes all the works under his own name. And we have a young nurse who is determined to tell the truth about this crime to the whole world, and which puts her own life in danger. And Professor Ken keeps working, he keeps reviving heads, he tries attaching and succeeds in attaching the heads to dead bodies and reviving the whole human. And strangely enough, bodies can influence the head. So this book is full of ideas, and it's kind of an autobiographical because at the time it was written, Alexander Belyaev was ill. He was almost paralyzed, and he felt that all that is left of him is his head. So it's kind of an autobiographical book. in this way. And I believe it was his first novel, and it was published in a magazine, I suppose, like most of the pulp fiction was published. So it was written to be published in magazine. I'm telling you it all because I try to explain why the writing style, why the writing was so awful. It was extremely awful. I would say it was a very good outline of a very good novel, but it wasn't a very good novel. And I know the translators, they are not supposed to change the writing style, but I really hope that this time they did. And I really hope that the writing style gets better with time, because I'm looking forward to reading The Amphibian by Alexander Belyaev, the second work that was translated in English. I also managed to read half of the book by Hungarian author. Sorry, it was on the learning languages. It was non-fiction. I hope I will talk more about it in my January 2018 wrap-up. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and happy reading.